"Search him," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the hum of late afternoon traffic. "Because that man just stole my Rolls-Royce." The words landed like a dropped glass in the middle of Fifth Avenue, drawing eyes, slowing footsteps, bending attention toward the black phantom idling at the curb and the man standing beside it. Marcus Reed didn't move. The city moved around him instead. Horns in the distance, a bus sighing at the corner, the faint click of heels on polished sidewalk. But in that small circle, everything tightened. Red and blue lights flickered against the car's mirror-like finish, washing over his calm expression. Victoria Hale stood a few feet away, posture perfect, chin lifted, one hand gripping her designer handbag like a badge of authority. Her gaze never softened. It scanned him once, slow and dismissive, taking in the worn denim, the faint smudge of grease along his wrist, the quiet stillness that didn't match the luxury parked inches away. "I watched him walk up like he owned it," she added, louder now, for the forming crowd. Phones lifted. Someone whispered. Someone laughed under their breath. A police officer stepped forward, boots firm against the concrete, hand resting near his belt. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step away from the vehicle." Marcus's eyes shifted, not in panic, not in protest, just a measured glance toward the officer, then back to the car. The reflection staring at him in the tinted door looked unchanged. He inhaled slowly, the kind of breath that steadies more than just lungs. "I didn't steal anything," he said, voice even, almost quiet against the rising tension. Victoria let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Of course you didn't," she replied, her tone coated in disbelief. "People like you never do, right?" The words hung heavier than the sirens. A second officer approached, radio crackling softly at his shoulder. The first one gestured again. "Hands where I can see them." Around them, the city leaned in closer. A man in a suit paused mid-step. A woman across the street tilted her phone for a better angle. The phantom's polished chrome reflected it all: curiosity, judgment, certainty, distorted across its flawless surface. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He simply reached into his pocket slowly, deliberately, eyes never leaving the officer's face. The movement drew tension like a pulled wire. "Easy," the officer warned. Marcus stopped halfway, then shifted his hand open instead, empty, visible. A pause. Small but thick. "You might want to check the VIN," Marcus said quietly, almost as if offering a suggestion rather than a defense. The officer blinked, momentarily thrown by the calm precision in his tone. Victoria rolled her eyes, crossing her arms tighter. "Seriously?" she scoffed. "He thinks this is a game." The radio crackled again, louder this time, a voice breaking through static with urgency. The second officer turned slightly, listening. Marcus lowered his hand fully now, letting it rest at his side, the city's noise creeping back in at the edges of the silence. His gaze shifted once more, not to the officers, not to the crowd, but to Victoria. And in that brief moment, something unreadable passed through his eyes, something steady and certain, like a decision already made long before anyone else realized they were part of it. The officer's head tilted slightly as the voice on the radio continued, low but firm, numbers and codes spilling out that did not match the situation in front of him. He glanced at his partner, then back at Marcus, as if trying to reconcile what he was hearing with what he was seeing. The crowd shifted again, the earlier confidence now thinning into uncertainty. Victoria noticed it too. Her posture stiffened, fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. "What is taking so long?" she demanded, her voice sharper now, less controlled. "He is standing right there." The first officer did not answer immediately. His eyes flicked once more to the phantom, then down toward the lower edge of the windshield where the VIN plate rested, barely visible unless you knew exactly where to look. He stepped closer to the car, crouching slightly, the reflection of the flashing lights sliding across the polished metal as he leaned in. Marcus remained where he was, shoulders relaxed, gaze steady, as if time had slowed only for him. "Hey!" Breeze moved through the street, carrying the faint scent of rain from somewhere far off, stirring loose papers near the curb. The second officer pressed his hand to his earpiece, listening more intently now. "Repeat that," he said under his breath. The response came back clearer this time. His expression shifted. Not dramatic, not sudden, just enough to break the rhythm of the scene. Victoria saw it, and something in her chest tightened. "Officer," she pressed, stepping forward half a pace. This is not complicated. But it was no longer simple. The first officer straightened, eyes moving from the VIN plate to Marcus, then to Victoria, then back again, as if the space between them had quietly changed shape. "Ma'am," he began, slower now, choosing each word carefully. "This vehicle is registered." Victoria let out a short laugh of disbelief. "Obviously it is registered. It is mine." The officer did not nod. He did not confirm. He simply continued, "It is registered under Reed Holdings." The name hung in the air, unfamiliar to most, but not to Marcus. His gaze did not shift. It deepened, almost imperceptibly, like a door opening inward. Victoria blinked once, processing, then shook her head. "That is impossible." Her voice lost a fraction of its certainty. The second officer lowered his hand from his earpiece, stepping closer to his partner. "Dispatch just confirmed," he said quietly, but loud enough for the nearest listeners to hear. "Full ownership traces back to Reed Holdings Incorporated." A murmur rippled through the crowd, softer now, less certain, like a tide pulling back. Someone lowered their phone. Someone else leaned in closer. The phantom, still silent at the curb, seemed to hold the moment in its reflection, capturing every shifting expression in warped clarity. Victoria's lips parted slightly, as if a response was forming but could not find its way out. She looked at Marcus again, but this time her eyes searched, not dismissed. The grease on his hands, the stillness in his stance, the absence of fear, none of it aligned with the story she had already decided was true. "There must be a mistake," she said, quieter now, almost to herself. The officer did not respond right away. Instead, his attention returned to Marcus, waiting, as if the next move no longer belonged to law enforcement, but to the man who had never raised his voice once. The silence stretched just long enough to become uncomfortable, like a spotlight no one could step out of. Marcus finally moved, not quickly, not defensively, just a small shift of weight as he reached into his pocket again, slower this time, deliberate, giving everyone time to watch, to question, to reconsider. The officers did not stop him now. Their posture had changed, subtle but undeniable, shoulders less rigid, eyes more attentive than commanding. Marcus pulled out a slim leather card holder, worn at the edges, and opened it with a quiet snap that seemed louder than the traffic returning at the edge of the block. He held it out, not forcing it forward, just enough for the nearest officer to see. The badge inside caught a flash of red and blue light, reflecting across polished metal letters that spelled a name the officer had just heard through his radio. Reed Holdings. The officer took it carefully, as if the weight of it had shifted. Victoria's breath hitched, barely audible, but visible in the way her shoulders rose and held. "That does not prove anything," she said quickly, the words coming faster now, thinner, searching for ground that was no longer there. The officer did not respond immediately. He studied the identification, then glanced back at Marcus, comparing face to photo, calm to certainty. Around them, the crowd leaned closer again, but the energy had changed. The earlier whispers of accusation softened into curiosity, into something quieter, almost cautious. A man who had been recording lowered his phone halfway, unsure if he should keep filming or pretend he had not been there at all. The second officer spoke again, this time more openly. "Dispatch confirmed corporate ownership," he said, looking at his partner, then at Marcus. "Reed Holdings acquired Hale Group last quarter." The words landed heavier than before. Victoria blinked. Once, twice, as if the name did not register at first. Then it did. Her lips parted, but no sound followed. The city noise filled the gap instead, a taxi horn in the distance, the low rumble of an engine turning the corner, life continuing without waiting for her understanding to catch up. "That is not possible," she repeated, but the sentence no longer held the same strength. It sounded smaller now, almost like a question she did not want answered. Marcus closed the card holder and slipped it back into his pocket, his movements as controlled as before, as if none of this had required effort. His eyes met hers again, not with anger, not with triumph, but with a steady clarity that left no room for denial. "It is," he said simply. The officer handed the identification back with a slight nod, the kind given when respect replaces assumption. "Sir," he added, the word coming naturally now, no hesitation. Victoria's hand loosened around her bag. The leather strap slipped slightly against her fingers before she tightened her grip again, as if holding onto something solid might restore what had just shifted. The Phantom remained still at the curb, its engine barely audible, its surface reflecting a different scene now, one where certainty had cracked and something quieter, heavier, had taken its place. Marcus reached for the door handle, pausing for just a fraction of a second, not because he needed to, but because the moment itself seemed to hold him there, suspended between what had been assumed and what had just been revealed. Marcus's hand rested on the door handle, but he did not open it yet. The cool metal reflected his fingers, steady, unshaken, as if the tension in the air had never reached him. Behind him, the officers stepped back half a pace, creating space without being told. The shift was quiet, but it spoke louder than any apology. Victoria stood frozen where she was, the city noise slowly returning around her like a tide creeping back in after a sudden withdrawal. A taxi rolled past. Someone laughed 2 blocks down. But here, the silence still clung to her. "Wait," she said, the word slipping out before she could stop it. It was softer than anything she had said before, stripped of the sharp edge that had carried her voice just minutes ago. Marcus paused, not fully turning, just enough for his profile to catch the fading light reflecting off the Phantom's surface. The glow traced the line of his jaw, the calm in his expression unchanged. Victoria took a step forward, heels clicking again, but this time the sound felt uncertain, uneven. "If what they are saying is true," she began, but the sentence faltered halfway, as if she no longer trusted her own voice to finish it. The officer closest to her glanced sideways, then away, choosing not to interrupt. This was no longer his moment to manage. Victoria swallowed, her throat tight, eyes searching Marcus's face for something she could hold on to, something that would make sense of the ground shifting beneath her. You own Hale Group?" she asked finally, the name sounding different now, heavier, personal. Marcus turned a little more, just enough to face her directly. His gaze met hers without hesitation, without anger, but with a clarity that left no room for misunderstanding. "Yes," he said, simple, direct, the word landing with quiet finality. The air between them seemed to still again, but this time it was not tension. It was realization, settling in slowly, piece by piece. Victoria's fingers loosened from her bag, the leather strap slipping slightly before she caught it again, more out of habit than control. Her mind moved quickly, retracing everything she had said, every assumption, every glance she had dismissed. The crowd watched, but no one spoke. The earlier confidence had dissolved into something quieter, something reflective. A man who had been recording now lowered his phone completely, sliding it back into his pocket as if the moment was no longer something to capture, but something to understand. Marcus's hand remained on the door handle, but he did not rush. He allowed the moment to unfold, to settle, to reveal what it needed to. Victoria took another step closer, stopping just short of the car, her reflection now visible beside his on the Phantom's flawless surface. Side by side, but not the same. Not anymore. "I did not know," she said, the words barely above a whisper. It was not an excuse. It did not try to be. It was simply the truth as she understood it now. Incomplete and late. Marcus studied her for a brief second, not searching for guilt, not measuring regret, just seeing her as she stood in that moment, without the certainty she had worn before. Then he gave a small nod, almost imperceptible, and finally opened the door. The soft click echoed louder than expected, final, deliberate. As he moved to step inside, the street seemed to hold its breath again, waiting, as if whatever came next would define more than just the end of a misunderstanding. Marcus lowered himself into the driver's seat, the interior swallowing him in quiet precision, leather and polished wood reflecting a world that suddenly felt very far from the one outside. But he did not close the door. His hand remained on the edge, holding it open just enough for the outside air to linger, for the moment to remain unfinished. Victoria stood there, just a few feet away, her reflection faintly visible along the curve of the door, distorted by the car's perfect surface. She did not move at first. The weight of what had happened seemed to press down on her shoulders, pulling her posture inward, softening the rigid confidence she had worn so easily before. "I made a mistake," she said finally, the words careful, measured, as if choosing them too quickly might break something further. The officers remained silent, stepping back another inch, giving the space entirely to the two of them. Marcus looked at her, really looked this time, not at her clothes or her posture or the status she carried, but at the shift in her eyes, the uncertainty that had replaced certainty. He did not rush to respond. The pause stretched, long enough for her to feel it, to sit inside it. "You made an assumption," he said at last, his voice calm, steady, without accusation, but not without weight. Victoria nodded once, quickly, almost instinctively. "Yes," she admitted, her voice lower now, stripped of the sharp edges it once carried. "I did." The city continued to move around them, but softer now, like it had taken a step back to listen. A bus pulled away from the corner, its engine fading into the distance. Somewhere nearby, a door closed. Small sounds, ordinary, grounding, contrasting with the moment unfolding between them. Victoria took a breath, then another, as if trying to steady something inside her that no longer felt fixed. "I should not have called the police," she added, her gaze dropping briefly before returning to his. "I should have asked." The words lingered, simple but heavy, filling the space between them. Marcus considered them for a moment, his fingers resting lightly against the door, the cool metal anchoring him in place. "Asking requires seeing someone first," he replied quietly. Victoria's expression tightened, not in defense, but in recognition. The truth in his words did not need explanation. It settled in naturally, like something she had always known but never faced directly. The crowd had grown quieter, the earlier curiosity now replaced with a kind of shared stillness. No one stepped closer. No one spoke. It was as if the street itself had learned something in the span of a few minutes. Victoria straightened slightly, not returning to her old posture, but finding something new, something less certain, but more real. "I am sorry," she said, and this time the words did not rush out. They arrived slowly, fully formed, without decoration or excuse. Marcus watched her for a second longer, then gave a small nod, not dismissing, not fully accepting, just acknowledging. The gesture was enough. He shifted his grip and began to close the door, the movement smooth, deliberate. The sound of its sealing shut was soft, but final, like a line drawn without force. The engine hummed gently as the car prepared to move, but Marcus did not pull away immediately. Through the tinted glass, his gaze remained forward, steady, as if considering something beyond the moment that had just unfolded. Outside, Victoria stood still, the reflection of the departing world flickering across her face, knowing that whatever came next would not simply return things to the way they were before. The engine's low hum blended into the rhythm of the city, steady, controlled, almost invisible beneath the surface noise, and yet Marcus still did not move. His hands rested lightly on the steering wheel, fingers relaxed, eyes forward, as if the street ahead required more attention than it actually did. Outside, Victoria remained where she was, her reflection now fading from the tinted glass as the angle shifted, leaving her standing alone in the open air, no longer mirrored by the machine she had claimed. The officers had stepped farther back, their presence reduced to quiet witnesses rather than authority, their radios now silent, their posture neutral. A light breeze passed between them, carrying the faint warmth of the late afternoon sun mixed with the cool edge of approaching evening, brushing against the polished surface of the Phantom and the fabric of Victoria's sleeve. She exhaled slowly, the breath leaving her chest heavier than it entered, as if something inside her had shifted and had not yet settled into place. Her eyes lingered on the car, but not with the same certainty as before, not with ownership, but with distance, as if it had become something she no longer fully understood. Inside, Marcus's gaze softened just slightly, not in reaction to her, but in reflection of the moment itself, the quiet after something that could not be undone. He adjusted his grip on the wheel, a small movement, almost unnoticeable, but enough to signal change. The car remained still for one more second, then another, stretching time just long enough for the silence to say what words no longer needed to. Victoria shifted her weight, heels pressing into the pavement, grounding her in a reality that felt different from the one she had stepped into minutes earlier. Her shoulders lowered, the tension easing not because the moment had passed, but because it had settled into something deeper, something she could not ignore. She glanced briefly at the officers, then back at the car, as if expecting something more, some final statement, some resolution that would make sense of everything. But none came. Marcus did not look back again. He did not reopen the door. He did not add another word. Instead, he simply pressed the accelerator. The Phantom moved forward smoothly, almost silently, merging into the flow of traffic as if it had always belonged there, leaving behind only the fading reflection of its presence on the glass. Storefronts lining the street. The sound of the engine disappeared quickly, absorbed into the city's constant motion, until there was nothing left but the space it had occupied. Victoria stood there, watching the empty stretch of road where it had been, her expression unreadable, caught somewhere between realization and reflection. Around her, life resumed its normal pace. Pedestrians continued walking. Conversations picked back up. The moment dissolved into the background of the city, but not for her. She remained still for a few seconds longer, her hands slowly loosening from the strap of her bag, fingers relaxing as if releasing something she had been holding without knowing. The officers exchanged a glance before turning away, their job finished, their presence no longer required. One of them nodded briefly in her direction, not with authority, but with something quieter, something closer to acknowledgement, before stepping back into the flow of the street. Victoria finally turned, her steps slower now, less certain, each one carrying the weight of what had just unfolded. The polished windows beside her reflected a different version of herself as she walked, not the one who had arrived with certainty, but someone who had seen something she could not unsee. And though the city moved on without pause, the silence left behind by that moment stayed with her, lingering just beneath the surface, waiting to be understood. The city swallowed the moment whole, but it did not disappear for Marcus. As the Phantom glided through traffic, the rhythm of tires against asphalt steady beneath him, his reflection flickered across passing windows, storefronts, glass towers rising into the fading light. He kept his eyes forward, posture unchanged, but something quieter had settled behind that calm, something older than the street he had just left. A red light ahead slowed the car to a stop, the engine barely audible as it idled. Around him, drivers tapped their steering wheels, checked their phones, lived inside their own timelines. Marcus did not. His gaze drifted slightly, not away from the road, but deeper into the space between moments. The reflection of a pedestrian crossing. The street passed across his windshield, then vanished. For a brief second, the silence inside the car felt complete, sealed off from everything outside. He exhaled slowly, the breath measured, controlled, like someone who had learned long ago that reaction only feeds the wrong kind of attention. Behind him, somewhere blocks away, the street where everything had unfolded was already returning to its ordinary shape. But not entirely. Victoria walked without direction at first, her steps carrying her past storefronts she did not see, past people she did not register. The echo of her own voice from minutes earlier replayed in fragments, stripped of certainty now, stripped of justification. She stopped near a glass window, catching her reflection unexpectedly. For a moment, she did not recognize it. Not because it looked different, but because it felt different. The confidence she had worn like armor was no longer there in the same way. In its place was something quieter, something unfinished. She studied her own expression, searching for the version of herself that had stood so certain just minutes before, but it did not return. A faint sound pulled her back, the low rumble of a car passing behind her. She turned slightly, not expecting anything, just reacting. The Phantom was gone, but its absence felt present, like a space that refused to close. Back at the intersection, the light turned green. Marcus pressed the accelerator gently, the car moving forward without effort, merging into the stream of vehicles that filled the avenue. The city lights began to glow stronger now, reflections stretching longer across the glass, turning everything into layers of motion and light. He passed a large building on the right, its name etched in steel letters across the entrance, letters that matched the name spoken over the police radio earlier. Reed Holdings. The reflection of the sign slid across the car's surface and disappeared as quickly as it came. Marcus did not look at it. He did not need to. The truth of it did not live in the letters. It lived in moments like the one he had just left behind. A few blocks away, Victoria finally stopped walking. She turned back once. Not because she expected to see him, but because something inside her needed to acknowledge the direction he had gone. The street behind her looked the same as always, unchanged, indifferent. But she knew it was not the same. Not for her. Not anymore. And as the city carried on around her, loud, alive, constant, there was a quiet realization settling beneath it all, one that did not demand attention, but refused to fade. The night settled over the city slowly, not all at once, but in layers of light and shadow stretching across glass and steel. And somewhere between those layers, something inside Victoria refused to quiet down. She stood at the edge of the sidewalk longer than she realized, the reflection of passing headlights sliding across her face, each one gone before it could fully register, like thoughts she could not quite hold on to. Around her, people moved with purpose, stepping past without hesitation, their conversations blending into a steady hum that no longer included her. For the first time in a long while, she felt outside of it, not above it, not in control of it, just outside. Her phone buzzed in her hand, a sharp interruption that pulled her back. She glanced down. A message, then another. Notifications stacked quickly, each one lighting the screen with urgency she could not ignore. A video thumbnail appeared at the top, paused on a frame she recognized instantly. The phantom, the flashing lights. Marcus standing still. Her breath caught slightly as she tapped it without thinking. The video played in silence at first, then the audio followed, her own voice cutting through the speakers clearer than she remembered, sharper than she expected. Search him. The words echoed back at her, stripped of the confidence she had felt in the moment, replaced now with something colder, something harder to face. The comments scrolled beneath, too fast to read fully, but enough to understand the shift. The narrative was no longer hers to control. She stopped the video halfway, thumb hovering over the screen before lowering it slowly. The city noise rushed back in, louder now, almost overwhelming. Across town, Marcus guided the phantom into an underground garage, the quiet hum of the engine echoing softly off concrete walls before fading as he turned it off. The sudden stillness inside the car was complete, sealed, uninterrupted. He sat there for a moment, hands resting lightly on the wheel, eyes forward, as if the silence itself had something left to say. Above him, faint footsteps crossed the street level, distant, disconnected. He reached up and adjusted the rearview mirror slightly, not because it needed it, but because the movement grounded him, something small, controlled, familiar. His reflection met his eyes for a brief second, then settled back into stillness. The moment on the street was already behind him, but not erased. It never was. Back outside, Victoria lowered her phone, the glow of the screen fading as it dimmed. She looked up again, but the street no longer felt the same. Every passing glance, every reflection in a window, felt like it carried a question she could not answer quickly. She took a step forward, then another, slower now, more aware of each movement, each breath. The certainty she had relied on so easily before had fractured into something more complicated, something that required thought instead of instinct. And as she moved through the city that continued without pause, one quiet truth settled deeper than anything else. Not loud, not dramatic, but impossible to ignore, and it stayed with her long. After the lights faded and the moment itself disappeared into memory,